Story 1. The client who never took off his watch. Midnight at the top of the city. You can hear everything up there, the wind, the heartbeat of traffic far below, and one tick that refuses to stop. It was past midnight when I reached his penthouse. The city hummed below, a blur of light and distance, but inside the suite, silence had teeth. He greeted me with a soft nod, no handshake, no small talk. Just the sound, tick, 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 steady, close like something alive pressed between us. We sat facing each other on the low couch. His suit was perfect except for the gold watch clinging to his wrist. The second hand pulsed unevenly, slowing as he looked at me, racing when I glanced away. Our shoulders nearly touched. His cologne was sharp, new. The lamplight caught his mouth in profile, drawn in gold like the watch wanted me to notice only him. He asked if I wanted a drink, but his tone didn't wait for an answer. I reached to adjust his collar, habit maybe, and my fingers brushed the edge of the watchband. The fabric under my hand was warm. His skin beneath it wasn't. For a moment I thought the ticking stopped. Then it came back, faster, like it was covering for him. He leaned closer when he finally spoke. "You notice things," he said, the words landing close enough to touch the inside of my ear. His breath was slow, deliberate, almost timed. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if he was complimenting me or warning me. Each syllable carried that tiny mechanical rhythm, echoing from the gold around his wrist. For a while we just sat there, the clockwork pulse filling every gap between words. When I asked about the watch, half joking, half testing, he froze. The smile stayed, but nothing else moved. The air seemed to hold its breath. "It keeps me on time," he said finally, the pause between each word longer than the tick itself. Dinner waited untouched on the glass table. When I reached for the napkin, his knee brushed mine, light, deliberate. It didn't move away. The fabric whispered where it met skin, the sound small but heavy. I looked up. His gaze never shifted from the ticking hand. I told myself it was nothing, but my leg stayed exactly where it was. A strand of hair fell across his face when he turned toward the window. Without thinking, I reached to move it away. My fingertips grazed his temple, cool, almost waxen, and the skin beneath trembled once, like it remembered how to shiver. For a heartbeat, the ticking matched the rhythm of my pulse. Then it slipped ahead again, impatient. Neither of us spoke after that. The air felt heavy, scented with his cologne and something metallic, faint but constant. The city outside blinked and vanished behind tinted glass. I could hear our breathing, slow and uneven, as if the room itself were listening. Every few seconds the watch filled the quiet, louder now, like it had decided who was really in charge. He lifted his arm then, offering the watch as if to show me the brand. "It was a gift," he said, though his eyes didn't follow the words. The second hand twitched unevenly, skipping one beat out of every four. When I brushed the cuff back into place, my thumb passed over his wrist. The skin there was cold. Too cold, solid like the surface of marble. He smiled again, smaller this time. I leaned away, but the air between us held a warmth that didn't belong to me. When he finally stood, the ticking slowed, almost satisfied. I felt the echo of that moment on my own wrist, a faint pressure, a ghost of contact. His scent lingered, sharp, recent, unearned, and I couldn't shake it off. He stepped closer until his breath touched my neck. "Try it," he whispered, and before I could answer, the watch was already in his hand. He fastened it around my wrist, tight, perfect fit. The metal burned cold. I turned to ask why, but he was staring past me toward the mirror. There was no reflection where he stood. Only the ticking, louder now, pulsing against my skin. When I woke, the city was pale with morning. The suite was empty, sheets smooth, no trace of him except the gold circle on my arm. It still ticked, slow, patient, as if keeping its own time. I haven't taken it off since. Sometimes at night I hear a breath close to my ear, counting the seconds with me. Would you have kept it on? Story 2. The mirror behind the bed. I've learned that mirrors don't just reflect what's in front of them. They remember what stood there last. Room 614 proved that. 11:43 p.m. The suite smelled faintly of linen spray and expensive silence. I'd been in that room before, room 614, but tonight the mirror behind the bed sat a little off-angle, like it had been watching before I arrived. The client waited by the minibar, jacket half-buttoned, a smile rehearsed to look unpracticed. I remember thinking how clean everything felt, like the air had been wiped down too. He asked me to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. His cologne was sharp but new, like he'd sprayed it in the hallway seconds earlier. The light from the bedside lamp drew the outline of his mouth in amber, a contour that flickered each time he breathed. I told myself to look away first, but the mirror moved slightly later than we did. When he leaned forward to pour the wine, his cuff slid higher, showing a small scar near the wrist, pale, deliberate. I reached to fix his collar, a reflex more than a service. My fingers skimmed the fabric just long enough to feel the heat underneath, the steady pulse that didn't quite match his smile. The mirror caught it all, a half-second delay that made it look like I was touching someone else entirely. He spoke low, the kind of tone people use when they already know you'll obey. "Face the mirror," he said. I started to laugh, but the sound died halfway out. He stepped closer, his breath found my ear, warm, patient. "Don't turn around," he murmured. "I like it when you don't check." His reflection said it a beat later, and its mouth didn't close when his did. We drank quietly. The glass left a damp ring on the nightstand, a small bruise of condensation that seemed to pulse in the lamplight. He asked about my usual clients, my hours, whether I ever got tired of pretending. I told him I never pretended for long. In the mirror, though, my mouth kept moving after I'd stopped. A silent word formed behind the glass, something shaped like stay. He sat beside me again, legs too close, eyes on our reflections instead of me. The edge of his knee brushed mine beneath the table, a slow touch that should have been an accident, but wasn't. The contact lingered. The air thickened with something between heat and hesitation. I looked down, he didn't. In the mirror, we were still touching long after I'd pulled away. He noticed a strand of hair falling across my eyes. His hand came up slowly, not to touch, just to move it aside. His fingers stopped short of my temple, close enough for the heat to bloom between us. The skin along my neck tightened, a shiver pretending to be breath. In the mirror, his hand rested there fully, flat against me, waiting for something I didn't give. We stayed that way, quiet, the kind of silence that knows it's being overheard. The hum of the mini fridge, the ticking vent, our breathing, each sound had weight now. I felt the rhythm of his inhale matching mine, then breaking away by a second, as if one of us were lagging. The room seemed to hold its breath too. The mirror trembled like a lung learning restraint. He rose first, moving toward the window as if listening for something outside. The city noise felt distant, muffled by the heavy curtains. When he spoke again, his voice came from behind me, but his reflection stayed by the bed, still seated, still smiling. I blinked hard, once, twice. Both of him looked back at me, patient, expectant. He crossed behind me, close enough that the heat of him pressed through the fabric of my shirt. When he stepped away, the warmth didn't. It stayed, pulsing against my back. I caught the faint trace of his cologne in the air, clean, sharp, almost human, and then it soured, sweet like metal. I turned toward the smell. In the mirror, I was already facing it. He leaned in again, voice near my ear, a whisper balanced on the edge of breath. "Don't wipe it," he said. "Just watch." The sound grazed my skin, warm and trembling. I didn't move, though every part of me wanted to. His mouth lingered by my neck, but in the mirror he was on the other side, lips moving with no sound. "Do you ever look at yourself too long?" The thought came in my own voice. I reached out and dragged my hand across the glass. The surface fogged, then cleared, slow, reluctant. A face stared back, pressed to the inside, mine but older, paler, eyes wide like something waiting to be let out. Behind me the room was empty. Still, the heat remained on my skin, and the scent, his scent, hung there, refusing to fade. The next day someone booked room 614 again. They asked for the mirror to stay just as it was. Story 3. The Ride to Nowhere. They say every client has a story. But this one only wanted silence. No talk, no touch, just a ride to nowhere. The problem was, the road knew exactly where I lived. 3 a.m. The city lights had already given up. The highway stretched ahead like a sleeping vein, pale under the sodium lamps. My client never chose a destination. He only said, "Drive until the sun looks tired." That night, the air felt sharper than usual. Every breath carried the weight of something unsaid. He sat behind me, close enough that I could feel the rhythm of his breathing. The leather seats trapped the scent of his cologne, clean, recent, almost antiseptic. When I adjusted the rearview mirror, the dim light drew the edge of his mouth in gold. Our shoulders nearly touched when I reached for the console, and the silence between us changed shape, heavier, like it had noticed. The heater hummed softly, breathing warmth against the cold glass. I reached to adjust the collar of his coat, habit, maybe courtesy, but my fingertips scraped the edge of the fabric. Warm. Too warm, as if the heat came from beneath his skin instead of the vents. He didn't move. Just watched the road through the fogging window, where his reflection blurred into mine. "Do you ever get lost?" he asked, the question spilling close enough that I felt the words against my ear before hearing them. His breath carried a trace of coffee and something metallic, faint but insistent. I said nothing. The GPS whispered directions we both ignored, and his exhale lingered longer than it should have, like he wanted me to mistake it for a word. The fog on the window thickened, softening the world outside into streaks of silver and black. When he lifted one gloved hand, I thought he was tracing idle shapes to pass the time. But as the glass cleared with each breath, I saw letters forming, 2 initials written backward from my side. I didn't recognize them. Or maybe I did and didn't want to. We stopped at a red light that had no traffic on either side. The silence pressed close. His knee brushed mine beneath the console, light, deliberate, not an accident. He didn't pull away. The contact stayed there, quiet as a question, until the light turned green and I had to move. I swear I felt the pressure linger long after his leg shifted. The air inside the car felt heavier the farther we drove. When I turned to ask if he was cold, a loose strand of hair slipped into my eyes. He reached forward, slowly, and brushed it away with a single finger. The touch barely existed, yet the skin beneath it trembled as if it remembered something. His glove squeaked softly against the steering wheel when he leaned back, pretending it hadn't happened. We didn't speak again for miles. The road ahead swallowed sound, leaving only the hum of tires and our breathing, measured and uneven. Every few minutes, I caught his reflection in the window, eyes half closed, mouth moving without words. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it had rhythm, pulse, timing. I matched it without meaning to, until even the air between us felt rehearsed. Around 4, the GPS woke itself. The screen flickered, lines of static cutting through the map before it settled on one word: home. I reset it twice, but each time the route curved back to the same point. No address. Just that word, glowing pale blue. He said nothing, only tilted his head as if listening to something inside the engine that I couldn't hear. When I reached to turn the volume down, his gloved hand brushed mine. A second later he removed it and placed it on the dash, leather, creased, faintly damp. The warmth clung to my skin like memory. I could smell him now, faint and human, my own cologne worn wrong, a half step out of tune. It stayed there even after I opened the window for air. He leaned closer, so close that the next words touched my ear before they reached my mind. "We're here," he whispered. His unloved hand rested on the seat between us, pale under the dashboard light. A scar crossed the back of it, thin, silver, perfectly matching the one on my own. The sound that followed wasn't his voice but my own, echoed from somewhere behind the seat. The car idled in front of my building. I hadn't told him the address. Still, there it was, the same cracked street light, the same tired facade. When I turned to look at him, the passenger seat was empty. Only the leather glove remained, creased, warm, and smelling of my perfume. I sat there until dawn, trying to decide if I should drive away. Would you have kept driving? Story 4. The list of repeat clients. Some people think desire fades when the lights go out. they're wrong. Sometimes, that's when it learns your name. 9 p.m. The candlelight had already melted into a slow rhythm on the wall. I was updating my old client ledger. Names, dates, short notes only I could decode. But when I reached the last page, something felt off. Every name was crossed out in faint strokes of silver ink, except one. Fresh handwriting. My pen hadn't moved, yet the word glistened, alive as if breathing with the room. The scent came first, clean, masculine, like cologne freshly pressed against skin. My shoulders brushed the edge of the desk as if someone had leaned there moments ago. The candle caught the air, tilting its flame toward the ledger. The light drew the curve of a mouth on the leather surface, soft, deliberate. I didn't remember leaving it open. I ran a thumb along the edge of the page, careful not to smudge the ink. The leather cover was warm, as if it had been resting on someone's lap. When I adjusted the collar of my shirt, my fingers grazed the fabric of memory, soft, almost human. The page trembled under my touch, and a trace of cologne rose again, stronger this time, like it wanted to be remembered. The window was shut, but a voice threaded through the silence, low right behind my ear. Each word carried heat, shaping the air before it touched me. "Did you miss me?" it whispered, though I was alone. My pulse caught the rhythm of the flame, uneven and too close. I turned toward the sound, but the candle only swayed, like it had overheard a secret. I tried to convince myself it was muscle memory, some leftover fragrance from a client long gone. The ledger had survived years of rooms, sheets, and names that blurred into habit. But this smell? It wasn't from any bottle I'd worn or sold. It had the weight of skin after heat, the kind that clings long after the person leaves. I traced the last name again. The paper exhaled. My knee brushed the table leg just as something pressed back, soft, measured. The contact lingered, too purposeful to be chance. I froze, feeling the air shift. The candle stuttered, and a ripple of warmth crossed my thigh. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard breathing that matched mine, sinking, almost teasing. Then silence settled, thick and aware. At some point, I must have fallen asleep at the desk. The wax had hardened into pale folds, trapping the wick in amber. When I lifted my head, a strand of hair clung to my cheek, dark, fine, not mine. I brushed it aside, but my fingertips paused midair. The skin below my ear prickled, as if waiting for the gesture to repeat. The air still carried that cologne, newer now, closer. The apartment held its breath with me. Outside, the city whispered through pipes and neon, but here the silence had weight. I noticed the ledger lying open again, though I was sure I'd closed it before sleeping. The handwriting had changed, sharper, hurried. A single line cut across the page in dark ink. "You forgot me." I could almost hear the words form in the air, slow and certain. I backed away from the desk, notebook still open, ink gleaming like a pulse. Someone had to be playing a trick. An old client with access, maybe. But the apartment was sealed. Even the door chain still hung. The candles were gone, replaced by the thin blue of dawn. I almost laughed until I saw the indentation on the other chair, a shallow curve as if someone had been sitting there all night, waiting. When I reached for the ledger, my palm found heat. The leather was almost hot, and beneath it the table felt damp, faintly salted. My skin tingled as I lifted it. There on my wrist, a faint mark where the edge had rested. Not ink. Not dust. Warmth, like the echo of a hand that hadn't yet decided to let go. The smell of that same cologne bloomed again, sweet and wrong. A knock came, 3 slow taps that didn't wait for an answer. I froze mid-step. The voice followed, low and close, pressing through the wood like breath through skin. "You remember me now," it said. My throat tightened. I knew that tone, that pause before the next word. I'd heard it years ago, whispered against my neck. But that client never existed, not outside the ledger. The book slid open by itself, one page turning with a sigh. Tonight's date inked itself in the center, wet, trembling, precise. I stared until the candlelight caught again, and The sense circled back, patient and knowing. The door waited behind me, still half closed, still listening. Would you have opened it? Story 5. The house on Sunday evenings. They say silence is harmless, until you realize it's been listening longer than you have. He always booked me for Sundays. Same hour. Same house. He said he liked the quiet there, that kind of quiet that listens back. The drive took me out of the city and into nowhere, until the last signal bar disappeared. At 7 p.m. I'd pull up to the old White House, porch light already on, faint music playing from inside. Always the same melody. Always from nowhere I could find. He greeted me at the door, careful not to touch. But when I passed by him, our shoulders nearly brushed. A clean, recent perfume lingered, citrus and smoke, just long enough to make the silence shift. The record player spun by the window, needle trembling but never skipping. The song hummed soft, like breath through wood. I remember thinking how the light traced his mouth more than it should have. He asked if I wanted a drink, then watched as I fixed the strap of my dress. When I reached for the glass, his hand brushed mine, not enough to claim it, just enough to remind me he could. I adjusted his collar for no reason. My fingers grazed the warm fabric of his shirt, felt the pulse beneath. "You're always cold when you get here," he murmured, and the words landed heavier than they should have. He spoke close, closer than before. Each word ended too near my ear, carrying the warmth of a whisper that didn't need to exist. "Stay until the silence changes," he said again, as if testing whether I'd noticed the phrasing. The music played steady behind him, the same piano notes folding over themselves. When I turned, his breath followed, slow and deliberate, like a hand that hadn't decided to touch. Around 8, I noticed the record had been playing for too long. The same melody looped, but the needle hadn't returned to the start. I watched it spin, waiting for the click that never came. He sat in the armchair by the door, humming softly, one breath late to the music. It wasn't out of tune, just wrong in a way that didn't sound like an accident. He asked me to sit closer. I took the edge of the sofa, and the space between us disappeared one small inch at a time. My knee touched his beneath the table. He didn't move. Neither did I. The air thickened, holding its breath for us. His hand rested near mine, close enough to feel the warmth bleeding through the quiet. The song repeated again, still without looping. When he leaned forward, a strand of hair slipped over my eyes. He reached to move it, fingers slow, deliberate. His touch barely grazed my temple, but the skin below shivered before I could hide it. "You should keep it down," he said quietly, almost to himself. His eyes didn't quite meet mine, just followed the motion, as if the gesture had said more than either of us meant. For a while we just listened. The house had that kind of silence that learns the rhythm of your breath. The record player kept spinning, softer now, like the walls were absorbing the song. I could hear the faint creak of floorboards somewhere behind the closed kitchen door. He looked up at the ceiling, smiling slightly. "It's almost changing," he said, and the silence seemed to agree. The lights dimmed once, then again, and went out completely. The house exhaled into darkness. I waited for him to move, but he stayed perfectly still, his outline faint against the window's reflection. The record should have stopped, but the music kept going, thinner now, like it was leaking from the walls. He turned his head toward the hallway and whispered, "Do you hear it too?" When the power flickered back, he was gone. Only the record spun, empty, silent, pretending. I stood up, hand trembling against the table, feeling the leftover warmth where he'd been sitting. The air smelled of his perfume and something older, sweeter, almost metallic. I touched my arm. The skin there still held the shape of his hand, though he'd never really grabbed me. The song began again, faintly, from another room. I followed the sound toward the back room, my steps matching the melody. The record player sat there, turning on its own, no record on the plate. The song drifted from nowhere, soft and steady. Then breath near my ear. "Warm. Human." "It's still changing," a voice said, low enough to scrape the inside of my skull. I turned, but no one was there, just the faint smell of perfume and static air. Would you have stayed until the silence changed? I left before dawn, headlights cutting through the misted field. In the rearview mirror, the house looked smaller than it should have, like it was folding back into the night. A week later in my apartment, I heard the same melody while brushing my hair. No record, no speakers, just the hum of someone slightly behind my breath. It stopped when I looked up. The silence had changed.